A router table is essential to woodworking, whether you're a pro or a do-it-yourselfer. If you're a pro, you probably have the bigger version like this one here that's called a shaper. With a router table, you can accomplish the same thing, but spend a lot less money. You can do a multitude of things. You can make moldings, trim pieces, dados, roundovers, and flutes, as well as the necessary joinery for some frames and most cabinet doors. So there's lots of types of router bits out there. There's ones that have the bearing on it. There's ones that don't have the bearing on it. And then you have ones that you will use together as a pair like these that I make cabinet doors with. And with these, you can make the cuts necessary to make your own cabinet doors or also picture frames, things like that. So whenever you buy a router table, they usually don't already come with a router. You'll have to add your own. You need to just be able to take the base of the router and screw it to the bottom of this plate here inside the cabinet. That's where the router will stay, which is also how you adjust the depth of the router bit that you're using. You would adjust it up or down on the inside where the base is connected to. Once you get your router in place, you can connect the power to the back of this safety switch here, which you can also hook up your shop vac to, run the shop vac hose to the back of the cabinet, and run the power from the shop vac into the back of this plug as well with the router, so that when you turn this switch on, they both come on at the same time. If you haven't seen a switch like this before, this is what's called a safety switch. It allows for when this is pulled out that this will not turn on no matter what you do. So you don't have to always unplug it if you have this type of safety switch. Once you put that back in, then you're able to turn it on. Another thing to consider before you actually get started with your router is the size of the router bit that will be coming out of the top of the table. My router table came with different collar sizes so that you get the least amount of exposed area around whatever router bit you're using. If I'm using a smaller router bit like this, then I'll want to use this smaller collar. Some bits are so large that a collar just won't work with them. This one is actually kind of scary. Another thing to consider is the size of the shank of your router bit. They come in different sizes, 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch, which means that to put them into your router, you actually need what's called a collet of the same size shank of the bit that you're going to be using. If the router bit that I'm going to use has a bearing on it, that's going to serve as a guide for the material to run next to and get a nice smooth cut. But if you're using a bit that does not have a bearing, you will need to set up a guide fence. This guide fence came with this router table. And it just has knobs on the back that I'm able to tighten it down to the table without clamps. That way, when I have a bit that has no bearing on it, I'm able to use this fence to run the material along to get a nice, consistent, even cut. It's always a good idea to try to set your fence up nice and parallel with the slot here, just in case you might like to use either a square and put it into the router table's slot, or you could use what's called a sled like this, which will also allow you to clamp the pieces into position so you can make sure that you get good cuts on the short edge of your material. Set it up so that I can make a rabbit cut on the edge of this piece of plywood. Make sure you always use eye protection and ear protection. I can also plug in my safety switch and turn it on. There we go. We got a nice consistent cut all the way down the board. Now we're ready to make the next cut or do a different type of setup.